Get ready with me while I talk about my positive C-section experience. If you're new here, hi, my name's Georgie. I'm a first-time mum to a wonderful little boy who's now 1 year old. And I thought I would go through my C-section experience. I'm going to start this video off by saying, if you're considering having a C-section, if you've got to have a C-section, if you want a C-section, can I just say, you should have no fears. I understand the thought of it is scary, but the actual process to me was great. And I'll tell you what, I'd do it 1,000 times over. Honestly, I find myself almost raving about it. I just thought it was wonderful. Let's start from the beginning. I obviously elected to have my C-section, and how the process for me worked was, you say you want a C-section, then you have, for me, it was a telephone consultation with a consultant who talks you through everything, essentially. Opportunity to ask questions, lets you know the good things, lets you know the bad things, and from there you can make your informed decision. Obviously, for me, there was nothing that woman couldn't tell me or could tell me that was going to change my mind. I knew I wanted a C-section. After you've had your telephone consultation, for me, the next step was to meet face-to-face with an actual consultant, and that is where she kind of told me what was going to happen, the actual process. I got my medication, because there are some medications that you have to take before you have a C-section. She told me dates, times. She told me if I was 7 centimeters dilated, I couldn't have the C-section. That is where she went through everything. So, birthing time. So my C-section was booked in for Monday. I was booked in for 9 o'clock. And yeah, was looking forward to it. On the Friday night, so the Friday before the Monday, I started having some pains. Now, me being me, just thought it's part of growing a child. Little did I know that was the beginning of my labour. And let me tell you, had I realised I was in labour, I probably would have been more panicked. But because I was so naive, I didn't know. So Saturday, I wake up Saturday and I start decorating my son's nursery because I'm still in the middle of doing his nursery, right? Now, by Saturday lunchtime, these pains are getting intense. So much so that I'm having to stop what I'm doing and take a moment. I'm like, oh God, this is painful. It was at that moment I thought, should probably ring my midwife. So I called Mama's line and a midwife answered, and I said, I'm booked in for a C-section on Monday, but I actually think I'm in labour. She was like, oh, how far apart are you? And I was like, Christ, I don't know. I haven't been counting. No one's told me any of this. No one's prepped me for labour. They've prepped me for a C-section. So anyway, the midwife basically told me to have a hot bath, relax, and if I wanted to, I could start counting contractions, but there's no need for me to come in. So I thought, okay, great, I'm fine. So with that information, I muddled on until Sunday. So Sunday night, I rang Mama's line again and I had the same conversation. She said, how far apart are you? I had been counting at this point. Now, my contractions were so sporadic. I'd have a 45-minute gap, and then I'd have 3 in 5 minutes, and then I'd have 2 in 10 minutes, and then 1 and 45 minutes. It was so random. But I knew the answers that they were looking for this time because I'd already called. So I said, yeah, I'm having them every 5 minutes. She said, yeah, you're booked in for tomorrow for a C-section, but you can come in if you want. So I thought, no, I'm going in. I'm in a tremendous amount of pain. They booked me in, and I ended up staying there overnight. Now, it actually turns out that I was actually 7 centimeters dilated by 4 o'clock on Monday morning, and I was crying. Let me tell you, I was in bits because all I could remember was the consultant telling me, once you get to 7 centimeters, you've got to push it out. I was in pieces. I thought, this is my worst nightmare. This is going to be so traumatic. The head midwife did come down and talk to me because I was on the labour ward at this point. They'd moved me to the labour ward because I was on a little side ward when I was initially admitted, but now I've been moved to the labour ward. And the head midwife did come down and she said, are you sure you don't want to push? No, I'm crying, to be honest with you, a grown woman crying. I'm on the gas and air. I did also have pethidine, I do believe, which had helped with the pain. Next steps, they call my husband. They say, get down here, because my husband wasn't allowed to stay overnight on the labour ward because, it's there's females there, they're vulnerable. So it's a safety thing. So I called my husband. You best get down here. She's in labour. You're about to have your baby. A little did I know, but my C-section ended up being a Cat 2. Now, for a Category 2 C-section, I do believe that from the moment they make the decision to birth, I think it should be done within 75 minutes. Could be wrong, not a midwife. 75, 90, can't remember, but somewhere around there. I don't know why my C-section was deemed a category 2, maybe because I was 7 centimeters dilated. I'm not entirely sure, but nonetheless. So now we begin the C-section process. First things first, I had a cannula put into my wrist. There, basically, it went somewhere here. And I know it went there because I kept catching it and it was incredibly painful. I did get changed into a hospital gown, and I think they put some socks on me, compression socks. I don't really remember, but I mean, there are photos of me wearing compression socks in a hospital gown, so clearly that happened. Anyway, I went down to the theatre for my C-section. At this time, I think it was probably sometime around 6 o'clock in the morning. From there, that's when they did the spinal. So I was asked to sit on the bed, like hunched over in kind of like a gremlin hunch over position. It was pain-free, like it wasn't a scary thing at all. Like it was just really lovely. Well, you know what I mean? They put a big sticker on my back, and I assume it's to like, I don't actually know what it was for, but a big like sticker thing went on my back, and then they put the spinal in. They laid me back on my bed. I must also say this process was taking a bit longer because throughout all of this, I was having contractions. So every time I was contracting, they had to stop. So spinal went in, they laid me on the table. At this point, I also had like one of those blood pressure band things put on my arm. I had like a pulse thing put on my finger. They laid me on the table and I'm laying there, and they basically asked me to lift my legs up, which I was doing quite freely. So yes, could lift my legs up. Essentially, spinal didn't work. So because they needed things to go quickly, they decided they would also administer an epidural. Sitting back up, same process, hunched over, epidural's gone. Laid me back on the table, lift your legs up. I was lifting my legs up for a few minutes, and he said, if this doesn't work, then the next step is we're going to put you to sleep. So I was like, Christ, like, no, would rather not, do you know what I mean? Would rather be awake, but understand. They needed things to be moving. Thankfully, epidural worked, and off they went. They shaved me down below, because obviously not prepared, I'll be honest with you. 3 days in labour was not prepared. So they shaved me, and then from me laying on the bed to baby being born, can't even lie, it was probably about 5 minutes, if that. Now, this is the interesting part. Baby was born, all was well. Baby was actually back to back and had been essentially trying to come for quite some time, but was stuck. The surgeon said, I'm really pleased you decided that you wanted a C-section, because it would have been quite a difficult birth had you have tried, and actually you probably would have ended up here anyway. So yes, that was nice to know, nice that I'd made the right choice, if you will. But anyway, baby's been born. They let you see baby, they give you baby to cuddle. You're like, oh baby, bit of a distraction, because what they're doing now is sewing you up. I say they're sewing me up, they actually didn't. So again, I'm not a midwife, doctor or surgeon, any of the above, but I didn't actually have any stitches with my actual C-section scar. So I do believe at some points they were like burning me back together. Again, I'm not really sure like the medical terms for that. Probably should have done some research, but I don't want to get it wrong, so I'd rather just not say. But yeah, my husband did say to me, did you not smell it? So I do feel like I'm flying through this, but to be honest with you, although it's a very complex surgery, it was actually very simple. So after they put me back together, they wheel you to a recovery room. In the recovery, it was more like a ward, to be honest with you. But on the recovery ward, I had to stay there until I could move my arms. I don't know if it's normal, or I don't know if it was because I had the spinal and the epidural, but I was basically not allowed to leave until I could move my arms and I had feeling, because I actually couldn't feel anything basically from the neck down, which I understand could be a bit like concerning or alarming to some people, but actually it didn't even cross my mind, like, because actually in the recovery room they were encouraging my son to latch and practice breastfeeding, because that was something I wanted to do. So we was distracted by that, and actually the initial latching and things like that, pain-free, because I couldn't feel it. So I was on the recovery ward for probably about 40 minutes, maybe an hour. I feel like it was okay. I had 2 midwives who stayed with me the moment I had my C-section to the time I was recovered. Lovely, lovely couple. Well, you know what I mean. Lovely pair of midwives, really just, yeah, everything you'd want them to be. And then, yeah, after I had the all clear to go back to the maternity ward, we went back up there. So after we made it back to the maternity ward, you kind of put, for us, we were put in like a little curtained space. There was like 6 women, so there's 3 on one side, 3 on the other. You can like obviously close off your curtains and be entirely private, and then that is where you recover. In terms of like C-section recovery, for the initial couple of hours, I was still very numb. I couldn't actually wiggle one of my legs for quite some time, which no one was really that concerned about. It's, you know, just one of those things, can take a bit of time for one of my legs to come back, apparently. What was great about one of my legs being dead is after you have a C-section, you have to have, I believe they're blood thinning injections. They sting. Let me tell you, they sting. I think that's, in my personal opinion, that is the worst thing about having the C-section, is having to do the injections after, because you have to do them yourself. The first one I had though, obviously the nurses came to do, and they did it in my leg that was numb. So first one was perfect, couldn't feel a thing, it was amazing. Having to do them yourself, would not recommend. What I can recommend though is buying some Emla cream. It's like a medical grade numbing cream. It's your best friend if you have to have blood tests or things like that. Really helped with the injections and just made it a bit easier. But anyway, back to recovery on the ward. So after I had regained feeling in my feet and things, later that evening at about 8 o'clock, one of the ward staff came round and asked me to see if I could do a little walk. So when you go for your little walk, you've got a catheter with you. The first walk is very slow, very like, you're just doing what you can. No one's rushing you, no one's forcing you, but they do encourage it. When I did my first walk, you obviously have a little pad there, because obviously, you know, you still bleed after you have a C-section, you still bleed. So when I was doing my little walk across the ward, my pad fell out on the floor in front of everyone. Was a bit embarrassed, but also you don't really care. All the ladies are in the same position, like we're all doing it. So yeah, I mean, it was like a weird bit embarrassed, but also don't care. But yeah, I did my walk down to the end of the ward and came back. And then once you've completed that walk, they do encourage you to like just walk on your own, like going to the toilet, having a shower, things like that. The first night is a bit interesting because where I gave birth, your birthing partner, your husband, whoever, is only allowed on ward from 6 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. So the first night by yourself after a C-section, the worst bit is you having to go from laying down asleep to sitting up and collecting your baby for feeding, changing, etc. Sitting up after a C-section is painful. I'll be honest with you, it is painful, but I do have a little life hack. I got my dressing gown rope and I tied it to the end of my bed. So when I was at home, obviously I couldn't do this in hospital because I didn't think about it when I was in hospital, but when I was at home, tie my dressing gown rope to the end of the bed. So when baby was crying and I needed to sit up, I just had something to help me, because obviously your stomach muscles, your stomach, just that general area, it's been through a bit of trauma, so it's sore. But yeah, first night in the hospital was quite mad, having to like, because they do expect you to like do it all for yourself, which I get it, but also a bit crazy. But I muddled through the first night. It wasn't actually that bad because, I mean, when you think about it, 11 o'clock till 6 a.m. is not really that much time. So it was okay, to be honest. So the next morning, my partner had returned. And this day was all about getting ready for discharge. So had my catheter removed, had my cannula removed. Obviously, had to have a meeting with a doctor. Doctor will come and feel your tummy, make sure everything is as it should be, ask you some questions, just make sure you're good to go. You also have to pass 2 wee-wees. You have to do 2 wees. They want to check for a couple of things, make sure everything's working down there. After you have been and passed all of the tests and questions and checks, you are free to go. After we was discharged home, you get a 5-day check and a 10-day check with the midwives. You are also included in those checks. They want to make sure that your scar's healing, no issues, tummy's contracting back down, everything is as it should be. And then for me, I had to do my injections for 10 days after, which was fine, was manageable, we did it. And then that is pretty much kind of my C-section experience. Recovery, very briefly, I would say took about 6 weeks. You can't drive for 6 weeks after. I would say I was like definitely ready to drive. I felt ready to drive after 6 weeks. I think after the initial couple of weeks, I only came home on paracetamol and ibuprofen. Making sure you stay on top of them would be my top tip, because actually, although it's uncomfortable, I would say like not incredibly painful, but I guess it does depend on, everyone's different, okay? Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand everyone's different. But for me, overall, a genuinely very positive experience. I don't think recovery was that bad. If you have any other questions about the C-section, any more about the process, any more about motherhood, or you're just interested in following along with a fellow first-time mom, or just want to stick around, please feel free to subscribe. I'd love to have you here. It means so much to me in the channel that you can do that. If you want to watch some other videos or let me know other content you would like me to make, let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, thank you so much and let me know how yours went. See you later.